Welcome to this edition of the Abundance Empowerment Exchange. Very happy today. Have a very special guest, Cricket Barrientos, with me today. He's the CEO of Sounds of Autism. Cricket, want to welcome you to the Abundant Empowerment Exchange. Thank you for coming on, and I know you have a lot of exciting information to share with us in regarding autism today. So if you just take a moment and introduce yourself, and just if you would also define autism as well.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Cricket Barrientos. I'm the founder of an organization called Sounds of Autism. And recently we added at and others at risk, meaning anything from prenatal till the end of life that would be considered an at-risk population, which could be any of us at any time of our lives along our journeys. We were established in Goodyear, Arizona in 2011. We are 14 plus years of an organization. And our mission is to safely integrate children and families of autism and others at risk back into society through unconditional love and support. And our love is of families, and support includes all of us to help and support those families. The definition of autism, and really, I'm not going to give you the textbook definition. I'll just tell you autism is a neural development issue, delayed in development, and it is something that could be in anybody's bodies. And we're finding that this is one in 31 individuals in the United States that are diagnosed with this neural development issue, and it's intellectual, so it's a cognitive development, meaning that there's delays in processing information. There's mobile skills that do not develop fully, and sometimes they do overdevelop. Like there's a lot of geniuses in this population, and this we don't know what causes it. There's a lot of speculation coming out of Washington, D.C. right now of what may be the cause. But we do know that it is something that has grown exponentially, not just here in the United States, but throughout the world. And so we decided when we started this 14 years ago that our focus was to serve this population, to find ways to make their journey a lot easier, and supporting the families so they don't worry and they don't feel alone. And we asked our community to get behind it to support it. But as far as what the cause is or how do we make this go away, we're going to let the experts take care of that. And we're just going to focus on serving this population. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things I thought about, after asking you to come on is, I think more education we have about subjects like this, uh, I think it gives us a better understanding. For example, if I'm in the supermarket and I see a child acting out, I can think about autism, and maybe I wouldn't react or have an opinion the way that maybe I normally would because of that. And I think also have a little more compassion because maybe toward the parent that might be dealing with that. What are some of the signs of autism? Maybe some of the signs, and if you see a child acting up, or maybe that could be a sign.
Yeah. So with my son specifically, I miss the signs. Many parents do because we're in it. So we're not seeing it from a third party perspective. My son was lining his toys. He was he was putting a pattern together. Every time he did something, it would be a pattern. He would watch a movie from start to finish and he would be able to regurgitate that information verbatim. He wouldn't miss one line, and he would add the antics of that, anecdotes of those movies. And we call it scripting or regurgitating information, echolalia. So there's a lot of signs. My son flapped his hands. He would walk on his toes. He would pace back and forth. He would hum. Some kids I know they scream. There is behavioral issues that come along with this, and sometimes that's due to the oversensory. I always revert back to a computer, right? Their minds, the minds of an autistic individual tend to be very genius level. So they can see and hear, and all of their senses are very enhanced. So when that happens, they're taking in all this information. So we might hear, a typical person might hear just basic information around us where they're hearing things maybe 3 blocks over, and they're putting that all in their brain. But, you know, as a computer, when too much information goes into and you don't have enough memory, that computer just starts circling over and over again, and you're waiting patiently for that to catch up, right? With kids with autism, especially, that's a very similar comparison, right? They have so much information and they're so hyper focused that they don't have the time to process that information and compartmentalize where that information is going to be stored in their brains. And so these behaviors may exhibit because they're just overwhelmed with information. It's too much, and they don't have that time to, like I said, process the information, compartmentalize that information, and then de-escalate from that information. And when that happens, it's like a boiling pot of water that you have a lid on it, you take it off, and the thing just starts toppling over on the stove with all that sizzle. That sizzle is our kids reacting to all of that information being processed in their heads, or the loud noises, or whatever it may be. So, you know, we work with families to speak about this, and then we give suggestions on to how to help them get through those days where they have too much information in their brain.
Okay. Now, what would be the evaluation process? Say you have a child that you suspect, maybe someone hear this today, and they would take a second look at their child and say, well, maybe I need to have them evaluated, or what would be next steps if you do have a suspicion that your child
You
may
know,
have autism?
when I speak to families over the last 14 years and they come to me and they tell me they think their child has something going on, um, I start with the basic questions and ask them, like, you know, are they stimming? And I explain what stimming means: pacing back and forth, flapping their hands. Do they have to wear headphones, or do they put their hands over their ears when there's loud noises? Or are they in an environment where there's so many people and so many things going on that they just can't deal with that type of a thing? And when the parents are shaking their head and saying, yes, that stuff is going on, it doesn't mean their child has autism, but it definitely shows that there might be a possibility. So what we would do is we would start with talking to the school systems to see if they can be educationally diagnosed, because we want to get them in the proper classrooms for the accommodations of their child. And then we also get them into a psychologist or a psychiatrist to have them evaluate. A lot of times the families go to the medical general practitioners or their pediatric doctors thinking that they would be able to diagnose, but this is a mental health process. So they have to go to their general practitioners, right, and ask for a referral to somebody in the psychological or neural world to have their child evaluated. A general practitioner cannot do that unless they have that background under their umbrella. Some of them do. So when that's happening, I always tell them, go back to your milestone development and look at your milestone charts. And if you don't have one, you can find them, you know, just Google milestones and see if your child is meeting all those needs. If they're not speaking by a certain age, or saying 1 or 2 words by a certain age, or they're doing things that I just described, pacing, flapping, you know, scripting, echolalia, where they're repeating things they hear, and they're doing it in a very weird manner, like they just really remember things that are, it's just uncommon. We need to go back and look at those things, especially families that have, this is your first child, you have nothing to compare it to. Those are things that are very important. And if you're not sure, sometimes we're very in it as a parent. So we might be in a denial stage. We don't want to know that our child's going through this. or we just have no idea that this is happening, especially if they're not in a daycare or something where they can be compared to typical children, right? And so those are very important. Once we get you in a diagnosis stage, where a neuro individual is going to be diagnosing, there are a lot of other steps that go along with that. But let's get the diagnosis first, and then we'll start giving you the next steps one step at a time so that we don't overwhelm you, because we know as parents of autism that this is a very, very different journey for our families, and it's overwhelming and many times very emotional. So we want to make sure that we're there, we're supporting, and that they know they're not alone when they're on this journey. Because once the diagnosis comes, I call it a mourning phase. A lot of our parents go into a mourning phase where they feel like they just lost somebody. And the reason that happens a lot of times is because they had this vision when they were pregnant with this child that we're going to have a son and he's going to play football, or he's going to be a scientist, or I'm going to have a daughter that she's going to be a ballerina or a cheerleader. And a lot of times those things are not what's going to happen, but we'll find what your child's going to be extremely awesome at, and we're going to help you embrace that as a family, and we're going to help you make that the best journey possible for you and your child.
Is there a waiting time like for evaluation, or this something that would happen basically immediately if you're working with the school system?
Well, with the school system, the issue is a lot of times families don't realize until maybe the kindergarten or first grade level, right? Their kids are 5 or 6, because their kids have never been in an environment where they're socializing with other kids, or people can evaluate and see that there's something different. So, it won't happen until kindergarten or first grade because their kids aren't around other kids. But if you feel, or you have this instinctual feeling that there's something going on and things aren't going the right way, or your milestones aren't being met, we encourage you as early as 2 or 3 years old. So that's why a lot of our stuff, when you see the beginning stages, we talk about Candyland. Play some games with your kids that are chronologically for them. So like Candyland starts at 3 years old. You start learning colors and communication and taking your turn and all that kind of stuff. And if you're trying to describe this game and get your child to play this game and they're struggling with the basics of that, that's a little concerning. And that would be something that I would say would be a good starting point for you to start seeing some of these signs, start journaling them or documenting them, so that when you go to your general practitioner for their checkups or get ready for school, we can get them 3 to 4 years old. They could be in preschool, taking buses to the public school systems and getting the help that they need, or getting them in therapies right away. So once you get that diagnosis, you could get it before they even go to the school part of it. So education, diagnosis, if they're not already in school or they're not school age appropriate, we can get the medical diagnosis first, or mental health diagnosis first, and then get the educational diagnosis. And a lot of times that's even easier, because then when you walk into school, you're already like, my son's been diagnosed with autism, or my daughter. And the schools are like, okay, well, let us do our evaluation now to see what we need to do to accommodate their needs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what about government and community support for autism?
So many times, and we go to this diagnosis stage, and the child will be diagnosed with ADHD or some type of other cognitive term. And they miss the autism because maybe the autism doesn't exhibit until a little later in life as the development occurs. I always tell the family, when you get an ADHD or any kind of cognitive delay type diagnosis, don't stop there. Continue looking and seeing if the autism eventually exhibits, because that's very important. And I'm going to tell you why. Because many of the government programs that are offered to your families, you will get so much more if the autism is there. If it's ADHD or another cognitive delay in development, there may not be as much support for that. And our families will say, okay, I got an ADHD diagnosis. I'm happy. I know what my child's going through. They might even put them on some type of medication, later finding out the medication isn't working. As a matter of fact, it might even be causing more issue. And our families are still like, I don't know, I don't understand, there's got to be more, but they don't take that next step to go find out what is that more. And we're finding that many times the autism exhibited later in life, and those traits of autism exhibited later, and families forget to go back and continue looking for that diagnosis. And then when they ask for government support, they're not getting it because they don't have a true autism diagnosis. So it's very important. This is very important because I see a lot of families going through that portion of this stage. And they're very frustrated by the time I see them and meet with them. They might be 13, 14 years old, and this has been going on since, they're 3. So 11 years of living like that without truly having a diagnosis that could really support their child. They're going in a very different direction, or a very small direction, versus what they need to be, which is, the umbrella of autism.
And what if someone is listening today and they have a child diagnosed with autism? Are there any support groups that you're aware of?
We're in the West Valley, Arizona, but Sounds of Autism, we serve prenatal till the end of life. And we work with community leaders, first responders, educational leaders, because we feel like that's the next layer of what families may need or supported with. So this really helps. Sounds of Autism has over 850 resources within our organization throughout the state of Arizona. So here in Arizona, we can help families find all kinds of things. But people are like, well, what if I'm listening and I'm in West Virginia? Well, guess what? We are an international and global organization. We have following all over the world. And our reach is pretty big. I think we did one of our YouTube videos that went out to over 1 million people in the United States and throughout the international countries. So if you have a family, or you're from here and you came from another country, another state, we can guide you, because we have people throughout the whole world that could jump on and say, hey, I come from Uganda, and I can help you because I have family there. And so we really are able to support in guiding that journey and finding the right resources. And I'll give you a quick example. We had a family in Pakistan in 2011 that reached out to us. They won the lottery to get their visas, but they only had 7 days to move from Pakistan to the United States. And they chose to go in the Chicagoland area. And originally I'm from Chicagoland area. And they said, Cricket, we're going to be moving and we need help in finding school, education. This is where we think we want to go. And I said, oh my gosh, they have so many school systems. And I was able to utilize the partners that I had in Chicago, Illinois, and throughout the state of Illinois, to help this family move. And a year later, they actually reported back that they moved here, they bought a car, they got a house, they got jobs, and their child was actually on the honor roll. So we were able to help a family move in 7 days and find all the things that they needed. And so that's when I realized that the power of social media and these types of podcasts were so grand, because we could help people all over the world. And on YouTube, they can change the language to whatever language really works for them, because YouTube does that. And so it was a very easy way for us to take this digital library that we have on our website and just go from prenatal to end of life, create podcasts and similar content like this, so that we could support families in all different nationalities. And it really made us unified throughout the world.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, can you speak to treatment if someone's diagnosed with autism? What would be the treatment they would receive?
When they talk about autism spectrum, and you can see in your background and on my shirt, the spectrum truly is from the rainbow, right? So it's from one end of the rainbow to the other. Every child is different. They compare a child with autism like a fingerprint. One child with autism has its own fingerprint. So every process is going to be different for every child. But some of the similar processes are therapies, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. We have respite, habilitation, attendant care. We have horse therapy, music therapy. It just really depends on the child. So what we do, because there are so many different therapies that could be utilized, but also are needed for these families, is we sit down and do an intake. And in that intake, we talk about what are the common interests of that child. Do they like music? Do they like animals? Do they like technology? Do they like sports? And once they kind of share with us what their child likes or loves, then we focus on those activities that will better align with these children. There is a therapy out there called ABA therapy, and it's an action-based therapy, and it's a therapy that families, some love it and some don't love it. And it's kind of like retraining the brain or reconditioning the brain to think in different ways. So when you see kids pacing and flapping their hands and humming or screaming or whatever it might be to what we call stim to calm themselves, families don't like that because they think that makes their child awkward. They might go into that type of a therapy to recondition the brain of their child not to act in that way. Some people think that's very controversial. What I suggest to our families is I never make an opinion about any therapy, and I stay very neutral with these therapies because I feel like a therapy is created for a purpose, right? And these people, obviously, that are creating these therapies have their own passion or compassion for why they did it. And so as long as it's not harming the child or the family or it doesn't cause the child to harm somebody, we feel they should try every therapy and find what works for your child. Find the meds or the natural medicines that work for your child. And if you don't have those suggestions or solutions, those are things that we can make suggestions on based on all the different families that we helped. And we can also connect you with some of those families so you can interview them and find out why they chose to do that specific therapy for their child and what are the results of that therapy. Because everybody has a good idea, and when you look at their good ideas, a lot of times that's money driven. And I never want money, financial hardship or money for the purpose of somebody else's gain to be the reason that we refer somebody. We want to refer because it's the right decision for our families to give them a better journey and to keep everybody safe and make sure that that journey is the best we can possibly give them.
Yeah. Can the family be involved in the therapy?
Absolutely. There are family therapies just for the parents, right, that are going through this, or the family that's going through this. A lot of times, the family, like the parents, the grandparents, the sisters, the cousins, they may not even embrace the idea that your child has this diagnosis. They might just say, oh, they're spoiled. You just didn't know how to raise them right. And so there's a lot of internal issues, I say, with the families sometimes. And so when we do this intake, a lot of times I'll start with the parent and possibly the child or their adult child, and we'll sit down and we'll come up with a game plan. But we don't stop there. We encourage our families to bring the second circle ring of your support to the table. And we say, as a team, we help raise this child. It takes a community because everybody needs to know their role in supporting this child. If I'm working on not talking to my child like a baby, even though they're 23 years old, because they have this cognitive delay, and I want to talk to my son as an adult, but then they go into the family parties and everybody's talking to them like they're a child because they have those behaviors like a child, we're ruining our therapy, right? Because we're trying to go this way and that's being unwound, and that might be more comfortable for our child. And so therapy to me is everybody needs to know, what are you working on when we're working on certain things, and let everybody be a part of that. But educating, like you said, there has to be education, there has to be awareness. And we have to bring that to everybody around us. And we're always in teaching mode. And sometimes as a parent, you just want to take a break. I don't want to be in teaching mode, right? And so, right, this podcast is actually very relaxing to me because I get a little break from being a teacher. I get to share, right? I get to share and I get to listen, and you get to ask me questions and I get to answer them. It's so much easier. But sometimes our families don't get that break. And especially if there's behavior issues that are involved. Sometimes these kids are 13 years old, they're 250 pounds, and they're stronger than mom or dad or both. And they become behavioral and they start beating the walls, they start beating their parents. And next thing you know, the police are coming because these parents can't control these kids. We see a lot of this. And we're working with law enforcement and judges and lawyers to educate them on what a parent's going through in their home and why these things are happening. And how do we support to give these kids the best journey possible, even if they're behavioral? How do we work with these communities or these people to get everybody to work together, not to reprimand, but to reprimand through therapy, right? So if a judge gets this person in front of them, instead of saying, okay, you have to do 120 hours of community service because you made a mistake and you did something that you shouldn't have done, maybe that community service is attending life or job or safety skill classes to be a better community leader, a better citizen, and to remove some of these issues, or work with ABA therapist or therapy type sessions so that this child learns to control those behaviors and really be accountable for what they're doing.
Yeah. Now, is there support for, say, a parent want to go out on the weekend, or is there specialized groups there that they could reach out to provide support during that time?
A lot of our parents don't always know the journey and how it works. And especially when we get to 17 or 18, when this child's going to become a legal adult, and the parent no longer has the right to speak on that child's behalf unless they do all the legal stuff. And so there's something called Article 9, and this is specifically for the state of Arizona, which is amazing to me. Like, state of Arizona to me is where I would raise a child with a disability, especially autism. The Article 9 is a parent provider or a community provider opportunity where the parents would take classes and learn how to raise their adult child, giving them life job safety skills, taking care of the child's needs during the day or the night when the child needs support. This is for specifically children with autism or others at risk that cannot take care of themselves 100%. So my child, I call him middle function. Many of the teachers diagnosed him as high function, but he's middle function. What do I mean by that? He can do life, but he needs ongoing support. He needs medication management. He needs somebody to teach him how to work with the pharmacist. So if he doesn't get the right medications or he runs out, how to get those things. And if he had to do that on his own, there would be no way. So we need to make sure we surround him with people that can support him on those very important things, right? Because if he's off those medications, it goes fast. He could have a spiral and he could become a harm to himself or others. We need to make sure that we're supporting those types of things, or eating, or shelter, or how to pay his bills, or how to spend money. And so a lot of times families get a diagnosis and right away they open a special account for their child. They start raising money for their child or saving money for their child, and not realizing that if they save too much, they won't qualify for benefits throughout the state. So we want to educate as soon as possible how to set their child up with all the different things. So when mom and dad aren't here anymore, we already have that plan, and we're practicing that plan as that child goes from K through 12 school. By the time they get to 17 or 18, we already have the system set up. We already have the financial set up so that if mom and dad were to pass away, we already have a succession plan for that. But if we don't create that succession plan, or we don't come up with these different programs, and we know what those programs are, Social Security benefits, even if your child doesn't qualify right now because you make too much money, get them in the system at 5 years old. So that at least when they get to an adult life and they reapply, Maybe they were disqualified because they were under your care, but now that they're an adult and they're measured a month after their 18th birthday, they now are taken into their own independent life. They may qualify for Social Security and food stamps and all these things that they may need, and they will receive those benefits. But if we've saved too much money or we're not aware of those steps, and their child gets to that adult life, sometimes they get to a certain age and they no longer qualify for anything. So we need to make sure we talk to those families now. We don't care if you're 3 years old. Let's talk with those families. If you're pregnant and you have autism in your family and it's possible your child might have autism, those are conversations that we need to talk about now, so that when you do have that child and that child does see that, you see it fast and you have all the information you need to be successful on that journey and not be afraid to take that journey. Because I'll tell you right now, my son is amazing and we love having him. He has shown us a different journey. I believe he's a God's child. I mean, we're all God's children, but he's he's an angel, and he takes us on this journey and he shows us life in a way we've never seen it before. And it's just amazing.
Yeah. Now, is autism curable? Is there a cure, or is this a lifetime of care if you diagnose? Is there a cure or not?
You know, there's people that claim their children have been cured, and I would say my guess is they may not have been cured, but they've improved the different things that they deal with, like stimming and behaviors, and they've learned coping skills, or they've learned how to outgrow some of these behaviors that they may have had because they identify, they realize I have autism, and when I watch other people, I don't see them doing these things that I'm doing. So I realize that's inappropriate or wrong. And this is why I encourage the school systems. When you have a child that has this diagnosis, the worst thing you can do is remove them from general population. Now, if they have behaviors and they are harm to others, we have to modify. But when you remove them from typical society, and then after they go through all of their classes up till 12th grade or 20, 21, 22 years old, and they graduate, now we're going to throw them back into a population that they have no idea how to even adapt to because they've been removed from that. So I encourage the teachers. We have a training program for educators from K through college that teaches them how to work with students that have autism within their classrooms. And it's amazing. And I've had schools adopt our program and the outcomes have been better because everybody's included. So yes, there's ways to do that. And I think, you know, we do that in society, period. And I think that we're losing a pipeline of people that could do a job and do it very well. They'll never be late. And if they're late, it's because they're dealing with something and we would have to accommodate. But if we really look at all the behaviors and the traits that go along with the autism population, there's a lot of commonalities that people are unaware of. But if they can get these kids to a level that we're able to get them to many times, they will have some of the best pipelines out there because these kids are brilliant. But there's a lot of things that you have to do to get them there. And we do that. We work with these students online and in person. And once they get there, we're putting them out there and they are the best leaders out there. They're not afraid of anything. And it's just amazing to me.
But Cricket, what would you say to that person that's listening today and they have a heart to help? They may not have a child with autism or anything, but they just have a heart. They're just a person that love to help other people. What are ways to help? Are there ways to help, ways to advocate, things of that nature?
You know, Robert, we spoke about this and we'll go over these programs a little bit more, but we created what we call the four strength walls or the four foundation walls of our organization. We focus on autism and others at risk. We learned that a lot of our programs that support integrating the autistic population into society, whether it's, at the beginning of their life till the end of their life, this program also works for individuals coming out of incarceration who have been behind closed walls for many years of their lives. This works for people in the domestic violence populations, kids that were trafficked or adults that were trafficked, and now they're trying to integrate back into society. And so, for us, we have a lot of people that want to support, and we learned that community and community leaders were like, we'll support this population, all of those populations you just mentioned, but how do we do it? So we have created an awareness training program where community and community leaders, first responders, and that's including police, fire, medical, mental and behavioral health, and nonprofits, right? Because we call them responders. And then we have our educators, our teachers from pre-K all the way to college level, where we bring them into a warehouse or we bring them online and we teach them about life on a spectrum. And we call it Spectrum Talks and Tips. And with this, we bring them in and we say, we want to educate you on your role in supporting the critical needs of these populations. And how do they do that? And how do they become more involved? If they see somebody throwing a temper tantrum at the grocery store, instead of rolling your eyes and going, wow, that parent doesn't know how to raise that child, or that child's spoiled, walking over to the parents and saying, how can we support you? Do you need us to call somebody? Can we help you? Can I watch your cart with your person there while you're trying to crawl under the clothes in Target to get your child out from underneath there because he freaked out that the lights were too bright or too many people around him? Those, we call them community responders. And we have an educational program, but we also have a resource and workforce development program. And this workforce development program is to teach life, job, and safety skills to the autistic and disabled populations. And they work with these community people. So everybody's in one realm, whether they're online or in this warehouse, they're working together to learn each other. We have to make up for the time that these kids were pulled out of general population, or these communities like people incarcerated or domestic violence or people that were sheltered in this box of life because of whatever their circumstances were. We're able to come in and teach people how to include that population and build that pipeline and not be afraid to work with these individuals that have been living in this box, how to help them open that box and feel safe in that environment. And that's why churches and nonprofits and people in the community and community leaders, servant leaders, people that are truly there to serve their community, do so well with us, because they see that not only are we here to help you, but like our first responders, when they go to a call for service and they have a critical need within that community, all they have to do is take this little QR code, the families scan it, and within 24 to 48 hours, we're working with that family to get solutions and reporting back to our first responders, mayor, city council, fire, police, nonprofits, and saying, that family that you brought to us, we're helping them. And do you know now they volunteer their time to support other families? It's amazing. And we grow, and we have grown because of that model.
Yeah. Did you want to share anything about your locations? I know you have multiple locations.
Well, Robert, I'm going to share with you two things. So our other three programs, other than Sounds of Autism and Other at Risk, is Unified Responder Communities, Just Ask Outreach, and the Skill Center. And each one of them focuses on those different, community leaders, first responders, and education. If you go on our website, you can see all these different and how we're bridging the gaps, right? I call them bridging the gaps. Everybody knows their role in supporting. But our warehouse is right now housed in Goodyear, Arizona, and it's 1,300 square feet. And we have everything from hygiene products to towels to sheets to pillows to clothing and furniture and you name it, whatever's being donated. And every day we get more donations. But it's also a place where we're teaching our technological students how to graphic design and make t-shirts like the one I'm wearing, or backdrops like what you have. And we're teaching them how to do that. So we have a STEAM portion, And we also have our workforce and traditional development where it's hands-on, boots on the ground. However, because we serve for prenatal till the end of life, if we have a community like an adult community, and the specific one I'm going to name is the Colonnade out in Surprise, Arizona, they have a ton of people out there and they have 3 levels of care. They have the 55 and over, they have the people that are starting to show potential signs of maybe dementia or different mental and behavioral health issues. And then they have the one that's assisted living, right? Where they're there and they're under 100% care. We're teaching that community how to be more unified, how to work together. These 55 and over active adults in the Sun Health umbrella is saying we want to give back to people out in our community. I said, well, you can do that, but why not within your community? You have people that need support just within those 2 other stages of life. So we go out and we bring activities like hygiene products that they can put together, or we have soap that they pump into little, travel size containers. And then some of that we leave with them and say, go find people in your community that you can give this to. One, as a gift to make them not feel alone. And 2, to get a conversation started, to find out what other needs they have within that community. And so we call that a unified initiative, and it's to create unified responder communities. We call those team builders. So everybody coming together understands the purpose of why we're doing this, the importance of why we're doing this, and how to take this information and go back out in the community and work together to truly say, hey, we're here to support one another. And so it's just really been amazing. And I'll be honest with you, right now we have a lot of ambassadors like yourself that are out there learning about other needs in the community and reporting back to us and saying, hey, Cricket, have you ever met these people? And because you're doing that work, Robert, and we're benefiting from that, and everything that you've done in the last, I don't know, we've known each other a long time, like 5, 6 years, that it gives me the time to work in the trenches with these individuals and these communities while you're out there finding those needs and saying, hey, we need to include this. And that's how we've grown and expanded to being a global and, international organization, is because people like yourself that really bring a compassion and a passion to our organization, that you want to help us grow and serve, and vice versa. When you have needs, we want to be here to support you.
Got it. And Cricket, I know you do some amazing events. I've been to several of your events, and you really put your heart and your passion into it. And I know that you love what you do, and people love you too, because
Thank you.
I know you have connections with so many individuals. Can you take the next maybe 3 or 4 minutes and just wrap up any final comments that you have? And I'm going
Yes,
to put up
so
your website as well on the
awesome.
screen so people can connect to that.
That would be great. Thank you. So Sounds of Autism, we're going to have 2 major events going into 2026. We backed off a little bit this year because we want to really put our effort into creating some really awesome events. So our first event will be in April, Autism Awareness Month. And we will be doing something, it has not been announced yet, but we'll be doing something out at the Goodyear Ballpark. It's going to be a unified celebration, but we have some big surprises coming and announcements coming. So we will definitely keep that, under wraps now, but I will be sharing that with you, Robert. And then in 2026, November 21st, out at Camelback Ranch, we are working on, and that date may change, but I'm going to say November 21st because I think it'll probably be there. I'm guessing it'll be that date. We're going to be doing a more STEAM portion, and it's going to be our drone event. And so we're going to have a drone team, Team Wolf Raptor drone team, and we're going to be working with MLDR, Major League Drone Racing. It's a gentleman that I met through some of my past, and he's amazing, and he's done so much globally as well. And we're coming together, and they will be raising money to support us as well. So these 2 large celebrations or events will be what we use to help us pay for our warehouse overhead so that we can continue on this mission for a very long time and sustain what we've already accomplished. So we definitely want everybody to stay tuned, watch our website, watch our social media posts. And if there's somebody out there listening now that has a donation of anything that could support families or just want to get involved by volunteering, reach out to Robert, reach out to myself, or go to our website and connect with us so we can get you in here and just experience working with the disabled and at-risk populations. And Robert, I do want to say thank you for everything you do to support us, and congratulations on your podcast and everything that you've done. You've been an amazing support solution. I'm so glad that we stayed in contact, and I hope to share a little bit more about our other programs on our next podcast.
Oh yeah, would love to have you back, Cricket. You have so much valuable information, and I'll say that uh, the love that you have for your son, you and your husband, that's one of the most important things that someone can give a person with autism, a child with autism. So, and thank you very much for coming on and sharing. Those of you that are watching this, you can go to the Abundant Empowerment Exchange website on YouTube, or you can find us on Facebook. We have a group on Facebook that you can go to and check us out. So thank you so much for watching us today, watching the podcast. Cricket, as I mentioned, you just had so much dynamic information to share with us. So I'm so glad you take time to come on this early Monday morning that we're doing this, and I hope you have a good rest of your week, and we'll definitely be in touch. So,
Thank you, Robert. You have a great week. Thank you so much.
all right, have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.